Welcome, Ben Kuchera.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about marketing, as I said before, and this is one of my favorite topics because the better developers get at marketing, the easier my job is. And what people don't understand about the press is it's not really my job to figure out what to cover. In a given day, I get about 50 to 60 pitches from everything from Kickstarters to games to reviews. It's my job to tell people no. And the easier it is to say no, the easier it is to get rid of that email and move on to something else. Marketing is probably one of the most important things as a developer you're going to do. And so real quick, if everyone could introduce themselves.
Yeah, hello, I'm Oddur from Klang Games in Berlin, Germany. So I'm kind of on the developer side. So I'm kind of, you are preaching to me. You're telling me how important marketing is because as developers, we kind of tend to just shrug it off. It's something that we're just gonna take care of. But yeah, so that's me.
Hi, I'm Margot. I run a marketing agency called MargoBrando. We specialize in video games and entertainment technology industry.
I'm David Reid. I am the Senior Vice President of Publishing for Motiga out of Bellevue, Washington, making Gigantic. Prior to that, I was the Chief Marketing Officer here at CCP.
So this is something I hear from indie teams all of the time, and it drives me crazy, and I want to get your thoughts on it. What is your first reaction to the words, "a good game sells itself"?
Who starts?
Well,
I'm going to start. I'm going to start? Ladies first, right?
Ladies first.
Okay, so I think, yeah, of course, a good game has better chance to sell itself, right? But, you know, often, you know, games are made by like tech people, and one thing that lacks a lot of the time is a business plan or a good business person in the team that is actually, you know, planning the marketing ahead of, you know, launching the game, and that's one of the issue with this a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame my former manager, Hilmar, is not here because I remember when I first started with CCP, I asked him, I'm like, Hilmar, why haven't you guys done more? I mean, you have this great story to tell. And one of the things he said to me, which may be relevant for somebody in the audience, was, well, David, a lot of Icelanders, frankly, look at marketing as cheating. And that really stuck with me. And I think for a lot of people, they look at marketing there is an evil side of it. If you're trying to sell somebody something they actually don't want, that's where I think a lot of that sentiment comes from. But in many ways, it's like what Ben was saying. There are lots of people who are going to be interested in what you're doing and have no idea that you're out there and no idea what it is you're doing. And the marketing job, whether it's you as a team or a professional that you work with or a program that you run, is to get that right message about what you're doing in front of the person who will be interested. And so, you know, yes, sometimes a great game does sell itself. There are Minecrafts and Flappy Birds, and there's always great examples, but most of them don't. Most of them you do have to do some effort, and don't think it's just advertising, but marketing is just that science of communicating what it is you're doing to the person who wants to hear about it, knowing that, you know, all of us here have far more things to pay attention to than we have time for. You have to find a way to make that message stick.
Yeah, definitely. A good game, it's better to sell. So it's easier to sell a good game, but you still have to sell it. And marketing is so much more than just like buying banners and stuff. It's also community building. It's like talking to investors. It's building everything around it.
Mm.
And it's so funny when you read comments on stories you write and someone's like, this game came out of nowhere. Like, this company always gets their game covered. Like, how lucky is that? And like what the press knows and what may not be public for everyone else is everyone you've thought that about has someone on that team who is ingenious at marketing, who has the relationship with the press, who knows who to call, who knows how to write the perfect email. It's not that the press randomly stumbles across the same games backed by the same people over and over. It's that these are the people who are very good at marketing and combine that with a great game, and that's where hits come from, basically, whether it's YouTube or traditional press. Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing is, and I think we've all heard this a lot from smaller teams, is you're talking to a developer at an event or something, they've had a few drinks, and they say, listen, I can barely afford to pay my artists and programmers. Like, I do not have a marketing budget. There's just nothing, you know, there's no blood coming from the stone there. What is your reaction to that? I'm sure a ton of people are in that boat or feel like they are.
Yeah. They definitely feel like they are, but you cannot not afford to do marketing. And you have to always be doing something. I mean, you can do it yourself, you can go on Twitter, you always have to be selling, like you always have to be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very beginning, obviously, like spending money is scary, especially when you don't have it. But realistically, a company that is going to make it, they're going to get some sort of funding at some point. And actually, if they manage to get the funding, that means they did something right to start with. But then there's that moment where you get some sort of money, even if it's not much. You need to think about putting some of that money aside for marketing, whatever marketing activity it is.
Yeah,
it could be PR.
And it's scary because it's so intangible putting money into marketing. You don't know what you're getting, but you still have to do it, and it feels so vague and like you can't put your finger on it.
I guess the
you're scared
problem a lot of the time is that people don't understand what marketing means, and there's a lot of elements that are part of marketing. And to start with, generally, it's very much all around PR. Yeah. It's all around like understanding and getting like good explanation of what your game is and what it is in a very succinct way, and making sure that you don't go and send like huge emails to the press, which they won't understand and they won't really pay attention to. So it starts with very simple process like this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of people, when they say we don't have money for marketing, they largely mean we don't have money for advertising. Sometimes they mean we don't have enough money to get a booth at a trade show. All those things are true, but you're always marketing. I mean, the people who were up here just pitching were marketing. They were marketing to you and to the investors and things. And it is the discipline around how you communicate and what are the things you're trying to say. I joked with Margot before coming on stage about whether I should wear my black hoodie over my orange shirt, and decided no, I shouldn't, because if you remember nothing else about this panel, you remember the dude who wore the orange shirt at a video game thing when everybody's wearing black and gray. And there are deliberate choices that we made at Motiga about teal and orange as colors because they would stand out alongside Call of Duty and Fallout and Assassin's Creed and every other game with male protagonists wearing combat dress. I mean, that's marketing. That right there of we are different, we have something to say, and here's a way to make you remember it, that isn't all about spending lots of money in advertisements or in trade shows.
Yeah, it's important to understand that you don't have to spend tons of money to do good communication. It starts with very basic things, and if you don't have a person in-house in your team that can do these things, then maybe it's worth going to professionals and getting the help, because sometimes that's what's going to make the difference.
And that's definitely part of it. I think anyone who had a game that became a hit had someone, even if it is just internal, who is amazing at marketing, who can put together a good email or pitch very well. And just thinking about it, if you have a 4-person team, spending an afternoon sitting everyone down and taking turns perfecting the elevator pitch, for all you know, you have someone who can speak incredibly well on your team, and you just don't know it yet. Just talking about who should be the person pitching at events or who should be the person writing email. It doesn't cost money, but it's thought that goes into it. So I really like people to walk out of these panels with actionable advice. So I'd like everyone to tell kind of a horror story or something someone did that's terrible in terms of marketing. So if this ever comes up at a meeting, they go, oh, Jesus, God, no, I was in Iceland and I heard that's just the worst thing.
Well, one thing that we see a lot with our clients and early stage startups is that they feel they have to be at a big trade show like GDC or PAX or whatever, and they often like book a space without thinking it through, basically. And they don't realize that having a booth at a show like GDC or PAX costs a fortune. And if you're going to do it, you need to do it well. You can't just turn up and have a table and a tablecloth and a computer, because there's a lot of people there, and you're not the only one, and there's a lot of noise. And most of the time, like, you don't necessarily have to be at these shows to, communicate about your product. You could do stuff offsite. You could invite the press to coffee or drinks or whoever you're trying to communicate to. You could do it offsite. Booths at shows like this are like, horrific. Like, they're so expensive. If you're going to do it, you have to do it well and put the money. So you need to know that this is going to cost you, a bit.
Probably the thing that people need to be aware of is they need to be proactive about the thing. They have to look for these conferences. They have to know the deadlines before submissions, because you can like go to these conferences and oh fuck, I should have been there. But because you weren't like actively looking for it, like, okay, what's coming up 6 months down the line? Like, oh, I should have been at Amaze. I should have been at IGF. I should have been there and there and there.
Yeah, these things need to be planned. You can't just turn up to a show without a proper plan in place and without being ready. And a lot of the time, companies book this space ahead, and then they just realize, okay, what do I do with that now?
So one action point, look for submission deadlines.
Well, and I would say, in the spirit of disastrous mistakes people have made, right? A lot of times people get too serious about whether it's advertising or PR demand generation overall too early, right? The thing that people need to remember is when you start small and you build a community, you get loyal fans. Those are very well-informed people who are very invested in what you're doing, right? The first person who makes a fan site about your game is going to be a loyal fan of yours for many, many years, no matter what you do. But the minute you start doing advertising, just to take it to the farthest extreme of the spectrum, you're bringing in a completely different kind of person who has no awareness of what you're doing, may not know, who you are, what your game is, or anything, and you have that 10-second moment to engage with them. And a lot of times, if you're not ready for that, if you haven't really nailed down all of your messaging that's showing up in an email or on a web page or a press release or an ad banner, or if your site isn't ready to accept accounts, if you just haven't gotten those things together, you don't get that person back. And so it's important to think of these things as like starting in a core and adding, fanning out to concentric circles. By the time you say launch and spend actual advertising dollars on that, you are bringing in a completely uninformed person versus the people that you've been working with along the way to build that community. So don't rush into the advertising process or spending demand generation until you're really confident you've got that core, and letting that core, whether it's just the people that are working with at your studio or the early community people and growing from there. Once you feel like you've really got that machine down at that point, that's the time to start bringing in that next group of people. And I mean, we were just talking about this, an example. So Gigantic is a MOBA. And a lot of people, when they think MOBAs, who are in the development community, we know what these acronyms mean, and we know when we think of League of Legends or Dota as a MOBA. But we did a little work because we're working with Microsoft to bring the game to Xbox One, and a lot of console guys think MOBA, and they're like, what does that mean? And we tell them it's a multiplayer online battle arena. It's like, yeah, cool, I play MOBAs, I play Call of Duty, and I play Halo. And that guy's not gonna like Gigantic if we don't give them the right message, but they may very well cost us money when they click on a AdWord in Google somewhere if we aren't tailoring the message correctly.
Yeah, and marketing, I mean, people tend to think about, or I tend to think about it in terms of hard and soft marketing. So you can do hard marketing, which is like advertising spend and CPIs and ARPUs and like a whole bunch of acronyms and big Excel sheets. Or you can do soft marketing, which is talking to people like you, getting like the word out, building the community, and that doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah. It's all about
just work.
It's all about how you started and what do you do next, and it's all about having a plan, really, a good plan in place. But realistically, you don't invent yourself a marketer. You need to understand what that means properly. And a lot of the time, people start marketing their game themselves, and they don't necessarily know exactly what they're supposed to do. And I would say that the start of everything is always through press and community building, like we were discussing earlier. If you've got like people that are fans at the very beginning, there might be a few of them, but they are the ones that are going to become your evangelists. They are the ones that are going to be communicating about the game, and creating more fans and helping you build that community.
Yeah, basically find your initial core fans and champion them.
Yeah,
treat them like rock stars.
Yeah, and I like the way you talk about soft versus hard, marketing in terms of where the dollars or the resources are being allocated, right? Because, a lot of buzz is being made about the Super Bowl ads that Supercell and other mobile companies made. And that whole science of, as Oddur was just saying, of cost per install and ARPU and things like that, it is a science that can make you a lot of money when you exploit it properly, but you can't do that until you've already proven that you've got something that works in soft marketing world, right? That if the only way that you are building your business is through hard marketing, you don't have a good business. You can't CPI your way to greatness. You have to have something that people intrinsically care about and understand. And I think we've seen how, the business of Zynga, for example, was very much a business where they were very vocal about divorcing themselves from the creative process. They didn't care. They cared about the metrics. They cared about the installs. They cared about the ARPUs. And as a result, people stopped caring about their games. It's an important part of the business, but it is a later stage thing. If you're not successful in that soft marketing place, if you can't build fans and excitement in smaller communities that are more targeted to what you're doing, you have to think about what you're doing before you go out and try spending the hard dollars.
Yeah, which generally startups don't have that kind of money anyway, so you gotta start smaller.
So getting away from mistakes, what are some tricks you've learned that work? What is something that someone can leave this panel with and go, we should try that. That's a really good thing. How can we help people today?
Sure.
If you could just give us all of your experience and knowledge that you
All of
normally
it.
charge
It's
for,
gonna be hard.
just in a 5-minute soundbite.
Well, I mean, I think for a lot of people here, right? You're here as an early stage developer. You've got a project that is probably something that is a labor of passion and love for yourself. There are people who will love and be passionate about that game as well, who don't know about you yet. And the way to go start the process, I think, in a lot of ways, is to find those communities of people and it's okay to be super, super niche-y at first and just start with that, right? If you're making a strategy game, find the strategy communities. If you're making a surgery game like Bossa, you probably don't want to go into the medical forums and things, but you'll find people who can get excited about what you're doing and build from there, right? Just getting started with that and returning when people show you that interest, you got to remember that for a lot of people out there, all of us in this building here, we are living the dream they have. They all want to grow up. They want to work in this industry. They love games. They love gamers. They want to be game developers. They want to learn what you're doing. They have excitement, and they want to amplify that. And no developer will ever love their game as much as those first fans will. Use that in a proper way and let them become those evangelists, let them get excited and return the favor for them. This is something that, again, Motiga as a company that's raised some money is in a different state than a lot of people. But part of what we did early on was when we started building that community and seeing our fans, we invited them to be community coaches with us at a trade show, at a PAX or something like that. And for a lot of people, that idea of, for me, at some point, going to PAX is just, I'm traveling again, I'm packing again, it gets a little old. But when you bring somebody in and say, hey, can you help us be a community coach at PAX? We'll pay for your badge, we'll give you a little money for food and drink and things like that they're overjoyed, right? They will work that show so much harder than, no offense, than the vendors you hire to do that stuff because they're doing it out of love.
This is doing
right?
great for my sales pitch.
But something like that, to engage with the fans in that way and let them be part of the process, pays back huge, huge dividends, even before you have the budgets to go out and build big booths.
Yeah, I would say even if you don't have a lot of budget to start with, in my opinion, you should always set a little bit of budget aside to have the professionals, the people that know about marketing to help you with what you have to achieve. I mean, with PR, for example, you can't, again, invent yourself a PR specialist. Good PR people are like people with a huge network and know the journalists and can get them down to the show, to wherever you want to invite your press and to talk to them. So I think it's all about not being afraid of spending that little bit of money to get it right. And obviously, a lot of pre-planning is required. You can't just attend a show and expect people to turn up and send them emails because, realistically, they're invited to to meet tons of people and they're invited to visit lots of booths and all that kind of stuff. So realistically, the one I have prepared this properly will have the best chance to get the journalists down to see them.
Yeah, and definitely as developers, we find it uncomfortable to be kind of extroverts. We like to be inside our little bubbles developing and not wanting to show anything to the world because it's going to be so good, it's going to sell itself, right? But actually go out there, try, if you say to yourself, I don't have a network, then start building a network and start talking to people and actually step outside that outside of that comfort zone and get yourself on a panel and start doing all these things. I mean, it's uncomfortable and all that, but I mean, it's worth it.
Is that what's happening right now? Yeah, well done.
If I can say one thing, it's no matter what you can do for marketing, it's better than nothing. Don't feel judged if you are buying the press drinks at the bar outside of GDC. We take a lot of meetings that way. You can have an iPhone with your game on it in the street in front of PAX, and you could probably get at least a few meetings, and that's worth something.
Absolutely.
I took a meeting one time in the basement of some random place, wrote a glowing preview of the game directly afterwards, and later on, it swept the awards at the IGF, and that game was Limbo, and I ended up looking like a genius because I was one of the few people to work, just because I took a random meeting. So don't be afraid of whatever you can do. You will not be judged by it, and even if you are by some people, the hits are worth way more than the people who say no no, and there will always be more people than say no.
But
sadly.
however, if you make the decision to have a booth at one of these shows, then in that case, you've got to do it well, and you've got to not be afraid of spending these extra pennies in, like, you know, do proper branding and do proper setup and make it look nice. Because the first impression is the impression that, you know, these journalists or these people are going to take away.
It's a full contact sport. You have to be aggressive about pitching to people and getting out there. Find someone who is, even if it's not someone on your team, if you have to pay for it. It's that important. Think of it a cost just like your art assets or just like your programming, because it is that important. And on that note, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for our panelists.